Hallo almal, welkom terug by Karen die Komponis. Dis 2026 en ons is in seisoen 2 en hierdie is episode 1 en ons gaan vandag met 'n baie interessante persoon gesels. Hy is letterlik wêreldbekend. Hy is Lance Phillip en nou gaan ek ongelukkig moet oorslaan na Engels, want Lance praat nie Afrikaans nie, oftewel nie vreeslik baie Afrikaans nie. Lance Phillip, welcome.
Thank you.
It's really such a pleasure for me to speak with you and to ask you all those little things that I've always been wondering about, because I always see you and everything that you accomplish, and I'm always in awe. And now I can talk to you about it. So that is wonderful. What I want to do this year is to focus on people who compose music, specifically classical music. But when talking about classical music, it can literally be anything. So it doesn't have to sound like Bach, or choral works, or piano works, or something for string ensemble. It can literally be anything that you can fit into the genre of classical music. And that is a very big and broad genre, but that's what I want to talk about, and specifically the composition thereof, because we think that classical music is something that happened in previous centuries. It's done, it's dusted, and we play it when we go to classical concerts, then it's heard. But that's not the fact, is it? What would you say?
No, I absolutely agree, Karen, and thank you very much for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to speak to you.
Yes.
And yes, well, I mean, I do think that with classical music, yes, the definitions can get a little bit narrow, in my opinion. So I think we generally tend to speak of art music, perhaps. So generally, art music can embrace any type of music that's written, firstly is written down.
Right.
And that maybe sort of differentiates it from popular music,
Right.
which it often just has a purely oral tradition.
Right.
Of course, it'll have elements of that, but I think that's one of the things that makes art music or classical music classical, is that the score is the primary thing. But other than that, once you write it down, like you said, classical can be almost anything. I think classical is one of those things that if people hear it, they'll know it, but it's hard to actually define.
Define, yes.
Yeah.
And what you say about writing it down, how important the score is. Why is it so important?
Well, I think the thing is with classical music or art music is that the point of writing it down is that other people can play it.
Right.
That's it. Whereas with popular music, or to an extent folk music, I guess, or even jazz to an extent, some types of jazz, is that a lot of it was written for the performer. The composer was the performer.
Right.
And there wasn't really a difference between them.
Right.
And then I think with classical music itself, to be technical about it in the Western tradition, let's say that classical music really started to become what we know as classical music when Beethoven came on the scene, being, starting to go deaf. But at the same time, you'd already started to expand the orchestra. And that was very unfortunate for him, because you're going deaf, now you have to conduct this stuff.
Right.
So now you have to write down more specific instructions.
Yes.
Whereas I think with Mozart and Haydn, maybe it was being played by them,
Right.
conducted by them.
Yes.
They didn't need to write down every single
Yes.
thing, and more so in the Baroque era.
Yes.
And of course, ink was expensive. Then Beethoven comes along.
The ink was expensive.
Ink and
Was
paper
ink really?
it
Really
was,
expensive?
It was, yeah.
And the
and
paper?
paper, very expensive.
Right.
Yeah.
Did they draw the lines by themselves?
Yeah, they had little wheels with 5 little lines.
Oh,
and
isn't that
a lot of
interesting?
that. Yeah.
So they also had gadgets.
Yeah,
Gadgets.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think they just made do with what they had. And so to write accents and fortes and,
Yes.
these things, that took a lot of ink and a lot of time.
Right.
Plus somebody had to write it down. It was
Yes.
their students. So I think if you were a famous opera composer, you had a whole production crew.
Yes.
Like Rossini would have all these students being paid
Right.
to do this.
But-
But I think with Beethoven, it starts to become the score becomes important. So you're not asking the composer anymore, because the composer might be in another city, or in Beethoven's case, he's deaf. He couldn't hear that the cellos were too loud or whatever.
Right.
Cellos are normally too loud, by the way. But that's why the score almost becomes the music rather than a representation of the music.
Yes.
And that's where the whole thing of interpretation comes in.
Yes.
And I think that's maybe more specifically, musicians are not only trained in being expert at singing or playing an instrument or even composing, but there's a kind of language that gets invented. What does forte mean in Vienna? How is that different to when it's played in La Scala?
And in Bloemfontein?
And in Bloemfontein for
Right.
that. Exactly. No,
Right.
exactly. How is it different when played on modern instruments? The Steinway, wonderful
Yes.
instrument. But when we play Bach, can we really play Bach the way
Exactly.
yeah,
And that's
exactly.
something that we spoke about with Frelet, also at the end of last year, how you use the instruments that are available now to play music that was written centuries ago. I mean, it cannot be the same,
No,
it cannot
can't.
sound the same.
No, it can't. And I think also when you divorce it from its context, so for I think a lot of, Beethoven was written for the concert hall, but let's say Bach, most of his music doesn't get played today because a lot of it was sacred music and written specifically for, a Lutheran service.
Right.
Some of it would be out of place in the concert hall. And then, then it's meant to fit in with part of the liturgy or,
Yes.
form
Understood.
after the sermon or before the sermon or whatever it was, or the
Right.
chorales that he wrote. And yet this is some of the greatest music we
Absolutely.
we see. And I think in a
Absolutely.
way Bach would have been quite amused by the fact that we study it in the way that we study instrumental music. Whereas for him it's, it had to do with the rhetoric
Yes.
and the meaning of the words. You
Yes.
take the words out, yes, the music's still beautiful.
Yes.
And I think that's why with Bach, the stuff that gets played nowadays in the classical sense, the Brandenburg concertos, the 48 preludes of fugues, the cello suites, all wonderful music, but not really his primary focus.
This is where we come back to score. If there wasn't score, music written down with indications of how it should be played, how it should be interpreted, etc., how would we have been able to have that preciousness here today, to be able to enjoy it, to be able to play it? That is the importance of score, and that really is the difference between, as you said, the art or the classical music and the contemporary music. To think about jazz musicians, they improvise all the time,
Yes. Yes.
So they really just need a chord progression and there they go.
Yeah. Or a tune or a jazz standard or
Exactly.
something. Yeah, and I think especially with jazz, I think many musicians have their own trios that they play together with
Yes.
for decades before they even
Yes.
start recording.
Yes.
Because there's certainly the spontaneity only
Yes.
comes with years and years of
Yes. Of
knowing what
the
the other guy's about to do.
Exactly. And as the music is interpreted and generated in the moment,
Yes.
it kind of feels natural to now move it on to the next person.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then that person goes with it.
Exactly.
And then it feels natural to bind together again. And in that sense, they make their music
Yeah.
instantly right there. And they will never go and write it down.
Yeah.
Well, hardly ever go
Yeah.
and write it down.
Yeah, they would play off a
Right.
lead sheet.
Yes.
But again, the bigger the band becomes, much like Beethoven.
Yes.
You have a big band, yes, then everything is written down carefully
Yes.
because it needs to be coordinated.
Yeah. So the more,
yeah.
not the merrier.
Yeah, the more,
Not always.
the stricter.
The
Yeah,
stricter,
you have
nee.
to be.
The more
of course.
difficult it actually becomes.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to get everything together.
Of course.
Because you don't feel each other so nicely, and they
Exactly.
don't understand when you actually mean, well, phew, I feel it has to go to you now, but you don't feel it has to come to me, and then what do we do? Then the music
Precisely.
stops.
And I think that only comes from
Unfortunately.
years of playing together. I mean, you form
Right.
what you're doing is forming a tradition,
Yes.
much like or whatever tradition it would be, the
Yes.
Italian tradition or the French tradition.
Right.
By the way, the French tradition, and I do a fair amount of French Baroque music, but no one really knows how to play it because I think every place had its own style of playing things. So Paris had this, but the other guy had this, and then they couldn't agree. That we don't even know really what the proper pitch was all the time. depended on the organ in that chapel. That's why a lot of French music looks so high, but actually because they were playing it toned down from modern pitch. It sounds like everything else, but it's just the way the thing is notated. It's difficult to sing nowadays if it's so high.
Right.
But you can't change it because then you lose all the open strings.
Yes.
If you transpose it. So it's all these little things you have to
Yes, there are so many
come
little
to terms
things.
with.
Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, speaking of Beethoven and that, he was the first, let's call him the first romantic in the Western tradition, which is true. But really what we do today, a century later, is we actually follow what Mahler did. So the great Gustav Mahler. So, and he's the one who spoiled all the fun.
Right? How did he do that?
And he's kind of the last romantic, really. I think Mahler spoiled all the fun. Obviously, I'm saying that as a joke, but music stopped being an entertainment and became a sacred art.
Sure.
The end of the late romantic tradition. Yes. And I think we can see this in his first symphony. So Mahler becomes this very famous conductor, Vienna State Opera, but his own music is misunderstood, or maybe it just wasn't well played. Who knows? It's still very difficult. But if you listen to the opening of his Titan Symphony, the number 1, it's really the first great big symphony that starts pianissimo.
Really?
A weird thing to do.
Yes.
The whole thing starts pianissimo. Yes. There are a couple of things. Mozart's 40th. Da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum, da-da-da. Starts piano without a loud introduction. But before this, I think music was loud because it had to get the attention of the audience. Now, if you think of nowadays, we go to a classical concert, even the students, rightly so, I think, are trained to be quiet when the curtain goes up or when the lights go off.
Right.
Because the piece might start softly.
Yes.
But before Mahler, music normally started loudly. You think of all those classical symphonies, they all started with a bang.
Yes.
With one or two exceptions. But for somebody to write a piece that is pianissimo for the first minute, and it's Mahler going up into the mountains and listening to the trees rustling. It's a sort of, German communing with nature, which Mahler was very into. The whole Knabenwunderhorn thing.
Oh, that is fantastic.
Wonderful,
yes,
wonderful piece.
And the more you talk, the more I want to interrupt you, and I tell myself, please be quiet, because. But in my mind, I've got so much to ask you, but I know we're not going to get to even a half of it. But I just want to say yes to nature, listening to nature. The other day, I want to say I was in my bathroom, and I just heard a bird outside, and it was going da 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 da. Da-da-da. And I thought to myself, but that's a lovely little theme. I have to go and write it down. And so I did. And my daughter said, Mama, I just hope you're not going to tell everyone about that. But now I have. But absolutely nature speaks, isn't it? And if you can just hear, you can get so much from it.
Oh, it's all there.
Yes, it is.
The birds, the planet's natural musicians.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, I think composers have been inspired by birds for centuries. I mean, you think of Vivaldi's concertos, all that stuff. Handel's, the cuckoo and the nightingale.
Yes.
Mozart's skylark, all that stuff. And then even going towards film music, the whole Mahler thing, it's the whole sort of semi-mystical thing of the tortured artist or poet or whatever goes into the nature to find the truth or the answer or just some relief. And the first thing that happens is that the birds start to speak to him or sing to him.
Right.
And that goes into Walt Disney too. The princess goes into the woods and the birds start singing. It's this thing of the birds being the prophets. Okay, sometimes it's funny and cute, but a lot of the times it's serious, getting divine messages.
Right.
The birds being the planets
through
music.
Through music, Much happens through music. We just don't realize it, but music is intertwined within us.
Yes.
But before we get to that now, I got way ahead of myself.
Me too.
Because I still wanted to go back and ask Lance, okay, you're in Bloemfontein now, but where are you from? How did you get here? Could you tell us?
My GPS malfunction. No, I'm joking. I can tell you how I got to Bloemfontein. The previous head of department in the Odeon, Professor Nicol Viljoen,
right?
He heard me at a Christmas service in Pretoria. I was always in Pretoria at a very nice parish church there. And he came to the Christmas service.
Heard you doing what?
Well, I was singing in the choir. I also happened to play the organ for one piece, and 2 of my compositions were being sung
Right.
in that service.
Fantastic.
So I guess I was just lucky. Well, Bloemfontein was very unlucky that he happened to be there that time, because then we spoke, and I think it was a year later he had he approached me about coming to Bloemfontein.
Right.
Which I did, and that was in 2009 or 2008, and I came here in 2009. So I've been here for 16 years,
Right.
or almost 17 years.
Okay,
yeah.
so you came here from Pretoria.
From Pretoria.
But you're not from Pretoria.
I'm originally from Durban. I was born
Right.
there. Yeah.
Durban.
Yeah, good old
That's
Durban.
where I'm from, right?
Yeah,
I grew
yeah.
up in Amanzimtoti.
Oh, there we go. There
you
we
see?
go. Yeah, there we go.
So we grew up in the same area, and we never knew about it until we came to Bloemfontein.
I know.
Right.
I know. Well, the great melting pot of Bloemfontein.
It is.
Yeah. And no, but before I was in Durban, and I lived there for most of my life. There was a short period I was in New York as a boy, and I was very lucky to go to a choir school there.
Fantastic.
Which is where I had my first formal music training, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And that stayed with me. I'm still a church musician in my spare time. And in '94, I went to Pretoria, and I lived there from '94 till 2009, until I came to
Until you
Bloemfontein.
came to Big Bloemfontein.
Big old Bloemfontein, yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. So now you are in Bloemfontein, but this is not where you started composing, is it? I want you to go back to the very, very first time you put notes down in your head. They do not necessarily need to be on paper yet, but in your head. Can you remember that time?
I can't remember anything too specific, but I know it would have been in New York, and just writing little piano pieces of 8 bars as a boy.
And you were how old then?
This would have been 84, 85, so I would have been 11 and 12
Right.
then. Because the nice thing was that we were every week confronted with wonderful music from centuries past, up till music written, the previous week. So we were constantly faced with new music. So we approached Gregorian chant and Palestrina and Bach, and then the English romantics, Stanford, Parry, that sort of thing. We didn't get a chance to, have the music explained to us. There just wasn't time.
Mm-hmm.
But we could feel it. You could feel it. As a boy, you walk into a room and you start singing this music, and you might not understand how it all works, but it's great. You can feel it. Like any audience can feel that Mozart or Beethoven or whatever is great. You might not understand it. Maybe that's part of the greatness for some people.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can't, go to your practice room and you try and write
you're
it.
inspired.
Yeah. So it was that. And then when I got to high school, I didn't do too much. I listened to a lot of music.
That was now back in South Africa?
That was back in South Africa.
Right.
It was from '86 until I went to varsity. And it was very strange because it was almost the opposite of a normal music education for a professional, I guess, Western trained musician, was that in New York, the stuff we sang was an Anglican church, was actually not really part of what we would call the common practice era. So not much tonal music. That sounds like a strange thing to say. We sometimes sang Mozart and Bach and that, and that was often a highlight because it was so different. But most of the stuff we sang was modal in a way. So the older music, Palestrina and that.
Yes.
Very, very interesting music. And then the 20th century stuff. A lot of it was modal. It was tonal in a way, but essentially modal. And so for me to go to tonality, I remember when I heard it, with the exception of a few pieces, I didn't really like it because I found it was too bright.
I can understand that.
And I didn't know what it was. And I realized it later when I started studying music theory more formally, was that the raised seventh.
Yes.
It just took me a while to get used to it. Now that sounds like a weird thing to say because most kids will be trained as pianists, and become professional. They're so
You
used to
kind of get confronted
you get
with a
confronted
major,
with it. Yeah,
exactly. To an art right
Exactly.
from the beginning. I mean,
Precisely.
that's the starting point.
Precisely.
Whereas for you, that was quite different.
Yeah, I just found it just too much. Even Beethoven, I found it too much, and
sure,
just too bright sometimes. Too
I
much.
understand.
Obviously, you grow out of that as you get used to it.
Yeah.
And then at university, I was immediately attracted to Stravinsky, Monteverdi, all that stuff. Also not in the common practice stuff. And things like Brahms, I only came to much later. But so it was very interesting to have this upbringing that you had the same notation system, so you could understand Beethoven in that sense.
Yes.
You knew what it.
Well, you could identify each part of it.
Absolutely, that wasn't the thing.
Yes.
But it didn't. It just spoke a bit of an alien language to me, or it's something I didn't really feel like listening to.
But that's another thing, language.
Yes.
Isn't it like growing up in Paris speaking Parisian?
For sure.
Or what do they speak in Paris?
French, Parisian.
French.
Parisian, French.
And then you come to South Africa and you hear Zulu.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just that clash in sound. What you hear, it's just, it doesn't fall right on the ear.
Yeah.
It sounds wrong. It sounds different, and it's simply because you have not been used to hearing it.
Well, exactly.
I remember when I came to Bloemfontein. I grew up in Natal. I heard Zulu there.
Yeah.
And when I came here, it really sounded strange to hear Sotho.
Yeah.
I wasn't used to it, but now that is the right sound in my ear.
Yeah.
That's what I want to hear.
Exactly.
It makes me feel safe.
Yeah, it's the soundtrack of Bloemfontein.
Exactly, the Sotho
You're
language.
Yes.
And now, if I go visit my parents in KwaZulu-Natal, it's like a shock. They speak language that I don't understand. I mean, I know a few words, imagine. I still know what sugar is and what milk is and up and okay, but that's besides the point. But yes, that's where language comes in.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so important. Yeah.
I think that's one of the most important things, and especially in classical music.
Yes.
Especially in classical music.
Yes.
I would say, again, and even staying within the Western tradition, you speak about the English language, and then you say, but why does Bach sound different even in the same era? And that's a more interesting point, because then you say, well, they were both tonal, Purcell, and then going forward a bit, and then Buxtehude, Monteverdi, Bach, and you realize that when Purcell wrote his music, it was specifically for the English language, and therefore, and the thing that makes English different from, say, German or any of the Latin languages is that English has been a subject, verb, object language for a very long time. It's just the sentence structure. So, of course, the verb will naturally take most of the stress. So the typical English sentence, let's say the boy kicked the ball, take a silly one.
Right.
The main thing is the kick, the boy kicked, you have the boy kick, and that is the highlight of the sentence, and for the rest of the sentence it will have this long wind down. And the phrase structure of English music from centuries ago is like that.
Right.
Whereas the German or maybe the Italian one, where you get the verb closer to the end of the sentence, even in Afrikaans, die seun het die bal
skop die bal, of die seun het die bal geskop.
Yeah, the older version.
With the verb at the end.
With the verb at the end.
Yes.
Yeah, and German works like that especially, and I think Italian to an extent. You build up to the verb.
Right.
And it's the same thing with the musical structure. That's why you get the whole phrase and then the sentence, the musical sentence, and you will cadence 1, 6, 4, 5, 1. It leads to the end because the language is like that. Whereas
and
with
here
English,
you cannot get away from the raised 7.
Yeah, again, you cannot get away from it.
You cannot get away from it. So this is fantastic, Lance. We have got so much more to talk about. I realize that this 15 minutes or 20 minutes is not nearly enough. And we're going to get back to Mr. Lance Phillip, and then we're going to continue this conversation, because one is definitely not enough. So Lance, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm going to see you again very soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I look forward to it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Dankie mense, so dis die einde nou. Ek moet dit darm in Afrikaans afsluit. Wel het ek gesê dat ons met meneer Lance Phillip weer gaan gesels, want ek het nou besef, een onderhoud is net naasten by nie genoeg nie. Ek hoop julle gaan weer by ons inskakel dan, in vervolg en dan luister ons verder. Mooi bly, totsiens.